Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Sparks, Entertainment and Art, where we talk to so many interesting people about so many interesting aspects of the band Sparks. And today I have an old friend of the show with me, someone who has been on a few times, and that is Mr. Paul Barrett.
Hi Monte, hope you're well.
Thank you, I am, and how are you?
Yeah, I'm keeping well. I'm looking forward to the weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing Sparks in a few weeks' time as well. I'm going to see him in Blackpool, so that's an exciting one.
I was going to ask about that. So you have tickets and you're ready to go.
I'm all set. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
going to be that's going to be amazing. Amazing.
yeah. I'm always so excited when they announce another tour. They just don't stop, do they?
They do not stop. But as we're going to talk about today, at some point they're going to have to stop.
Exactly, unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, but what a great segue that is into our conversation, because the reason that I asked Paul to join me today is there's two things that converged. One is that I've been thinking a lot about how we can get Paul back on the show, not only because Paul is instant ratings, but also because I just love talking with the guy, and he has so many interesting things to say. And the second thing is that I've been doing a lot of thinking about this album that will not go away, Mad. And I watched Paul's last video where he started to introduce his unified theory that Sparks pretty much have their career planned from almost from beginning to end. And you can fix it. And
Yeah.
There's a lot of clues in the music, and one of the clues come from their songs that have to do with the audience and their relationship to the audience.
Yes. So the second part about the audience is spot on. I want to make it clear, I don't think they've had it planned out. I don't think in the 70s they knew that they would still be going in 2026. I don't think it's planned out in that sense. But I think they always plan ahead with their music. So on the Wolf in Tweeter's Clothing, for example, there are things that hint that they're going to move to London and become a bigger band, and they're going to change. They're going to change into a different genre, and I think you get that every stage of their career. There are things that there are things that highlight what's to come, and you can only really see that in retrospect, because at the time, the audience wouldn't have known what was going to come. But yeah, my main theory is that every song by Sparks is somehow about Sparks, and that's quite a contentious one, because people think it might apply to some songs, but right now I'm making a video on Arts and Crafts Spectacular, which I think was 1968. And even that fits into this theory. It fits into this idea of them presenting their art to the public at large. So
I love your theory, and as the years have gone by and we've talked and you've laid it out in your videos, to which there will be a link because every one of them is fantastic. I've started to accept that there's more to it than meets the eye. I've always felt there was more to it than meets the eye, but I've started to see that some of the things that you're talking about actually make sense. And I guess where I would differ a little bit is I do see a lot of places in their music where they talk about what's coming next or where they've been and how they're coping, but I don't see it in every song. But
yeah. When I first started looking at the music this way, I saw it in a few places. A big epiphany for me is in the song One for the Ages, where there's that section, there's the middle eight, and they say, when the statues come, hope they look like me. When the prizes come, I will look to be humble in my speech, basking in applause. And it really reminded me of When Do I Get to Sing My Way? That's got the bridge where, they'll introduce me, hello, hello. It was like a really similar idea in two completely different, unrelated songs. And as soon as I started writing about that, I started noticing other similar connections where you have songs that are seemingly unrelated, but they're saying exactly the same thing, but just dressed up in completely different clothes. And what I found is the more I've looked into it, the more I've been able to um, pair every line or every song with another song, and then somehow use that to comment on Sparks themselves. So I do think it does sound unlikely that this applies to every single song, but I can. There are only two ways we're going to find out, and one is if
Well,
Ron and Russell confirm it, and the other is if I go through every single song, and that's going to take me some time. But I'm
people need to know how deeply you've thought about this over so many years, and they need to
yeah,
go to your video channel. What is the name of your channel? Metasparks. Check it out, and you can see that this is a guy who has really thought this out and is still thinking it out and still putting the pieces together.
thank you.
But I do come from a little different place, whereas I think some
Hmm.
of their songs, the Willies, is about a silly having the Willies, and that's okay. Uh, but you would probably say I Married a Martian would be, to me, it's a great song on the surface about a guy who had a misadventure. But let me guess, you would say it's about their disco period.
Yes, yeah.
I'm
I,
getting
I,
into ball speak.
I do. I think it's they'd just moved on from being a disco band or whatever you call the genre they were working on, from 1979 to 1980. Um, but yeah, it's this story about this alien that first of all they fall in love with and they're a perfect fit, and they have this quickie marriage, but then it turns into this monster that takes over the world, and that's what happened with the genre of music that they pioneered. And they're looking at it from the perspective of a band who have just gone back to they've just re-entered the rock world, and they're looking back and saying, I married a Martian. And on the surface it sounds like quite a weak justification. It sounds like something where you could think of 10 or 15 different explanations for I married a Martian, but line by line, when you look to see what parts of Spark's story it could connect to or what other
Mhm.
songs it could connect to, there's always a lot to talk about, which is why I don't think I've done a video that's under 20 minutes yet. They all take, no Spark song can be summed up in a few words, in a few sentences.
And you would agree that they can be very much enjoyed just on kind of a
Hmm.
so not superficial, but on a surface level. I mean, all
Yeah.
the songs we've talked about are wonderful songs.
Yeah. Well, what I found with Sparks is you can listen to a song and understand it. The first time you hear it, it can make pure sense. And then the more you listen to it, I mean, even the people who think I'm talking bullshit with my claims will know that after a few listens, you might notice some nuance or some,
Right.
little human characteristic. At the moment, I'm writing about Arts and Crafts Spectacular, and for that, there's the bit about some woman is always trying to push her quilt. I don't know how many people have heard the song, so I won't go into huge detail. But
It's a great
uh,
song.
yeah, it's really great, really great, and it's a story about an arts and crafts competition where they're all
Right.
bringing their paintings and whatnot to be judged. And there's this one character throughout is trying to push her quilt, and that repeats at the end. And it's such a nice little human touch to it. It's this surreal situation where you've got this, this moment of humanity. And yeah, I completely see that. and I first got into Sparks in 1994, and the first time I started coming up with these theories was in 2020. So I spent a long time loving these lyrics, just as they come.
Mhm.
But there are things that are hidden in there. I've
Well,
got no
I
doubt
think that
about that at all.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Mm,
Getting back to what you said about the human dimension, even the song that you just mentioned, "One
mm,
for the Ages," that's really
yeah,
there. You can listen to that completely on the human dimension.
yeah,
This is a guy who has this dream and aspiration. It's just never going to come true, but he
yeah.
believes he wants to do it. It's what he believes in. He's going to be one for his book is going to be one for the ages.
Yeah, well, that's one of the interesting things as well, because a lot of the time in these Spark songs, you can't tell if the character is a loser or if the character's a winner. And in One for the Ages, like you just said, you can read it as being somebody completely delusional, somebody who's, for those who don't know the song, it's about somebody who's he works in the accountancy department in an office, and he's secretly working on a book that he says is going to change the world. And that can be about somebody completely delusional. Same with when do I get to sing my way? It can also be somebody who's actually working on a real piece of genius that they think will change the world. I prefer the latter because it ties in
But
with.
it's funny you use the word loser, and I think everybody knows just what you're saying in terms of Ron Mail's writing and what he says.
Mm,
But I've given that some thought over the last few
mm.
months, and I have a different perspective.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think his characters are losers. I think what he does is this guy who is so doesn't show emotion when he's in concert and is just so stoic. But at the same time, I think what he's done is he's showing us just how we all think as people.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, this town, that guy. We've all been in situations where we want to where we have those Walter Mitty type experiences. We've all
Yeah.
been there. We've all had to deal with losing our virginity, right? And, you could go down the list. I mean, that doesn't make
Mm.
these characters losers. I think it's just that human dimension that you talked
Yeah.
about that probably isn't really talked about enough when it comes to Sparks,
Yeah. That's true. That's true. They seem to cover every facet
don't they?
of of the human experience, as far as I'm concerned. All these little nuanced things. But what I'm claiming is a lot of that is a byproduct of trying to say something about their art. It's the push and pull of the creative journey. It's performance and being accepted by an audience and all that kind of thing. But when you put it through the Ron Mail filter, you get all of these different layers of meaning. And I would never say that I'd never discount either the surface way of looking at it or the multiple ways of reading it. But what my theory is claiming is that the starting point, the foundation for every single song, is a comment on what Sparks are or what Sparks are going to be next.
What you said is so important because one of the things that inspired me to do this show is when you get to know fans and how they relate to the band, they all hear the music in very, very
Hmm.
idiosyncratic ways, almost as if it's relating directly to them.
Yeah,
And to me, that is just absolutely fascinating. Everyone hears their own life story. Maybe it goes back to that human dimension, which we can all relate to. We
yeah,
can all relate to these kind of being in a room with a woman who's way out of your league and don't leave me alone with her. We can all relate to these things.
yeah. For me, I don't have that human connection with it. I love the storytelling. That's what I always loved before. Was the how it's um yeah, these just wild stories
Yeah,
that focus in on bizarre little details. I've always loved that. I always thought they were
absolutely.
hilarious. Um,
Absolutely. And that's the way people relate to them. and
Yeah.
they love it on that level, and it's amazing what he does.
Yeah, I never used to feel that it sort of said anything about my life, I suppose. It always felt disconnected. It felt like a performance.
Yeah,
There's a lot of artifice to Sparks, and I love that. I think it's something that's criticized quite heavily and quite unfairly in music. People think that to make great music, you have to be pouring your your heart and soul and
yeah,
it has to be your real life in this music. And I think it doesn't matter as long as it's good and it's thought provoking or any other number of qualities.
yeah.
With this, what I think now, with it relating to the creative journey, in some ways that does feel really personal to Ron in particular. Yeah, like, can I give you an example? On Falling in Love with Myself Again, there's the section in that song where he says, I can't hear myself think with all this music blaring. And I think that relates to the music that he hears in his head while he's
Right.
busy in London making Kimono My House. And there's that bit where it goes, yes, I'm falling. Right. And for that, there's that can be interpreted as a very human thing. Like, I'm going through a crisis. Yes, I'm falling. But the whole time that's playing, there are like wild orchestrations going on in his mind. The dum dum dum. Do you know the bit I'm talking about? If you could,
Yeah, I know, and I know that you're part of your view is that he's right when he talks about sex and women. He's really talking about his music, right? And he's talking about
yeah,
his relationship to the music and how it's being produced.
yeah,
And it's a fascinating aspect. But I want to go back to something else that you said because
yeah,
this will be the perfect segue to this baby.
yeah,
You said that you've said in the video, and you've said it elsewhere, that the end they are starting to talk about the end,
yeah.
and how they foresee it, and you've also said it will be glorious and a
Mm,
great thing, and I think that is such an interesting thought, and I think
yeah.
that there's some truth to it, and that's or at least there's where I can see them moving in that direction, and that's what I want to talk about with you for a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, my feeling is that they set themselves these almost unachievable future goals and then achieve it. So, as an example of that, when I did a video on My Baby's Taking Me Home, rather than just covering that song, my my version of that story started on was it Music That You Can Dance To, I think. Sort of showing all these albums that were pointing forward to a point in the Spark story where they'd have complete creative and commercial freedom and they'd be in a position to make something like Little Beethoven. Every album that led up to it was done in order to achieve that goal. So they're always working towards this North Star, this thing they want to achieve. And when you see the Sparks documentary and see that they're for the Little Beethoven section of the Sparks documentary, that's the first time the camera crew goes into their home studio and shows how they work, and that was a long-standing goal to get this creative independence. I think since Little Beethoven came out, it's all been about staying in the same genre rather than changing every 5 minutes, but aiming towards a conclusion to the Spark story. And I've got some ideas about what I think that's going to be. I think it's going to be a very sad and human thing. There are lots of references to crying in various places in Sparks music. Towards the end of on more recent albums, they've focused on sadness as an idea a lot more than in any other part of their career. So, for instance, The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. Annette is all about sadness. There's, sadness runs right through that movie. So, oh yeah, Drowned in a Sea of Tears is another example of that. So, I think they're working towards whatever this grand finale is going to be, and I think that is going to be Ron Mael saying something deeply sad and personal and beautiful, basically.
No, I thought you had a much more positive and optimistic view about how they would bring it all to an
Yeah.
end.
I think it's going to be a reveal, and it's going to be joyous in that sense. And I think, fun and happiness is a real part of Sparks' DNA. But the most important part of Sparks' DNA is change. They constantly change into another form of the band, but they put that on hold. Yeah, since Little
My number
Beethoven, they
one
haven't been
favorite
doing
Spark
it.
song is about exactly that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's something that I think is fundamental to Sparks. There's a line on the song "The Louvre" from Woofer and Tweeter's Clothing, where they say they talk about a statue leaving the Louvre, and it says the tourist guide explains my aims. This one's a monument to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's how Sparks see themselves. They're a monument to change. But on Little Beethoven, they stopped changing to the degree that they did previously. And I think
That's true. I would suggest that with FFS, there was a change. It was actually went from a Sparks 2.0 to a Sparks 3.0, which is
there
where
was a
we've been since
change.
then, which is more pop focused, shorter songs. And
Yeah,
so,
I agree. On Hippopotamus as well, that followed that same template. It went more to, more straightforward structures, poppier, more accessible. But it did still feel like you still had the stacked vocals. You still had the strings.
absolutely.
Like the sonic template they were using, it still sounded like the same band.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Well, it's still them in the studio.
yeah.
No, I get
But yeah, my feeling is they're building. I think Sparks are great storytellers, and those stories don't just sit in individual songs. I think they're almost crafting the story of their career. So they're not all about looking the best. They're not about being the biggest band in the world. I think what they're driven by is this perseverance to be constantly putting out great music. And by throwing hurdles in their own path, they're able to continue challenging themselves and coming up with interesting music, which is why they've been going for such a long time, where all their peers have been left behind and it's just sort of on the greatest hits circuit. I think it's
I think that you're on to something. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Let me give you a sense of where I'm coming from on this. And I'm really interested in having this conversation with you because I feel like with Hippopotamus, with a couple songs on there, like Probably Nothing and a couple others, and then a little bit more on Steady Drip, 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 you started to get a sense of what they're really thinking about things, really talking more in a direct personal way than they generally did before. And then, as we talked about on this show, on The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte, I think that's where you're starting to see a different approach to the music, because on that album, I think they're expressing their view of the world, and that's another conversation we can have, and we did have. But I think that you start to see Ron really talking in a more straightforward way. while still being as brilliant as ever.
Hmm.
And then that gets us to Mad. And I'm going to present 3 different templates that exist in
Okay.
my mind about how to listen to this album. Okay. And we've hit on
Yeah.
all of them, because the first is it's a fantastic collection of great songs, you know, and the songs are fun. And I think it's one of the least mad albums I've ever heard. I don't think, you know, there's 1 or 2 songs that are kind of mad, but I think that's about it. But it's a good collection of songs, and there's nothing wrong with that. That could be all it is, you know, and that's great. But here's where it gets interesting to me. I think there's a second level, and I talked about this a little bit with Stephen Rutkowski on the show that we did together about a few months ago. That
Yeah, great episode. I really enjoyed that one. He's a talented guy.
He's talented and he's fantastic. And
Hmm.
on that one, what I talked about is how I think this is taking that what was beginning to be developed and really came through on Latte a step further, because now it's taking on kind of like, here's the world we're in, and this is a story of, it's almost getting to what you were saying, a concept album that you don't see it as a concept album. It starts off strong with, I'm going to do things my own way. And then he goes through various things and, you know, and misadventures, and things don't look good. But at the end of the day, he talks about what really matters in life, which is a little bit of light banter with the one that you love. And then the great, great closer, Lord Have Mercy, which is like bringing hope and inspiration and positiveness into it all. You know, at the end of the day, you have the personal relationship, and you can take a positive outlook on life and say, we're going to make it, you know, we're going to make it. And that comes through in such a positive and powerful way.
Yeah.
Now, here's the third theory. And here's where I think I'm really interested in what you have to say, because it relates to what you're saying. Okay. And I haven't talked about this on any show yet, because, okay, but you ready? I think that on this album, Ron Mael is giving us a lot of exposure into himself and how he writes songs and how he copes with the day and how it comes out at the end. Because it's not just a concept album, it's Ron. And it's just 100% ridiculous speculation. I get that. But at the end of the day, he wakes up feeling great, right? I'm ready to tackle the day. I'm ready to create new music and do the things that I want to do. And then I think there's a few classic Sparks type songs interspersed in it, like Jansport Backpack, Running Up a Tab, Drowned in a Sea of Tears. Those are really classic Sparks songs in their composition and their approach and their message. But I think in addition to that, you have his story, you know, Hit Me Baby. He's starting to be, you know, brought down in the world. He's starting to say, okay, I woke up feeling so great. Now things are starting to add up. But he still has my devotion. He knows what he's looking forward to. He's looking forward to that time of light banter, but he has to get there. He can't dog it. You know, he has to keep pushing ahead. And what he's trying to do and pushing ahead with is writing Sparks music. So these songs are about his process. And so this is how he goes about it. And then you get In Daylight, which I think is kind of a classic, another one of those classic Sparks songs.
My favorites on the album.
Perhaps revealing about Ron, perhaps not. We don't know. Yeah. And then here's the part I really wanted to share with you, because I think you talked about this or hinted at it in the video. The next 2 songs, I-405 Rules and A Long Red Light.
Yeah.
That's him writing music. I-405 Rules is when everything is great and the songs are just coming, and isn't it great? Everything is beautiful out there.
Yeah.
Then, well, here I am, writer's block, just sitting at this long red light. I don't got much, you know? And I love the contrast of those 2 songs right next to each other, because about the road, one is this big positive vision. The other is kind of like I'm stuck at a red light. And so I think that says something about, maybe it says something about his writing style. Maybe, I don't know. But then Drowned in a Sea of Tears, again, here's a classic Sparks song for you, maybe not related to the narrative at all. But then you have a little bit of light banter and Lord Have Mercy. And like I said in the previous interpretation kind of brings us back after all this that he's gone through during the day, of all the writing the songs, of all the dealing with life's travails, trying to dog it, trying to make it. At the end of the day, he's got the light banner and he has that positive affirmation of Lord have mercy, and he's ready for the next day. What do you think
I
of
really
that,
like
Paul?
that. I agree with a lot of it. I think it's it certainly fits my worldview
Yeah.
Of of it being about the writing process. I completely agree with that. I think one thing that one way that I look at their music that I think is different to most is I imagine it being Ron at home by himself on the piano, kind of challenging himself. So
Mhm.
it is writing about what he's thinking in that moment, his ideas on what Sparks can be. And that fits into this whole day night thing. Throughout their career, they've had a lot of focus on daytime, nighttime. And I think daytime is the craziness of, being in the kimono lineup of Sparks, for instance, where you've got very little time where you're constantly working, but then you go home at night and you get that complete freedom. So I think that day night shift is a big thing. And you see that in many places in Mad. You were talking about In Daylight.
Mhm.
Within Daylight, I consider it to be about if Ron's writing a song at night, then anybody can look great at night because it's just Ron and his imagination.
Right,
But
right,
to take
right.
that into the daytime where he's playing with other musicians, or I mean at the moment they're off making a film, so it's when he's going and collaborating, when you work on it in daytime, you're making it real. So in Daylight I Saw You is like saying this thing that I wrote last night. It was great last night, but anybody can look great at night. But in the
Right,
daytime,
right.
look how. And
What a
I
great,
think a
yeah,
lot of what you're saying feeds into that. The uh, pushing and taking your foot off the gas at
yeah,
the right times while you're writing this music and taking delight from it. Like a little bit of like banter that fits the songs about songwriting thing because
yeah.
it's writing a funny song, a little bit of like banter, and then we say goodnight. So that's his
And then we say
evening.
goodnight. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. And I think that I want to go back to the earlier point that
Mm.
with Latte, they really gave kind of that big glum picture of the world. And it is kind of, it has a lot of glumness on that album,
Yeah.
with exceptions. But
Mm.
here, I think we see kind of the other side of the coin. I think in the end, that's why I find it so funny, the name so funny, because I think at the end, it's a positive, affirmative message.
Mm.
It's like maybe this is how you deal with the crap we're dealing with today,
Yeah.
and mad isn't enough. You gotta look for the little things. You got to look for the human dimension that we've talked about,
Mm.
the human
Yeah.
relationships, and that's at the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Yeah.
And whereas on Latte, you would get the impression that whoever wrote this was a very morose person almost. But I don't want to overstate it, but I mean,
Yeah.
kind of downcast at least.
Mm.
On this album, I think it's the other side of the coin. And
Yeah.
then relating it to what you have been talking about, if there's some truth to what you're saying, then it would make sense that at this point in their career, they would start to do a couple albums that wrap up their worldview and kind of say, here's
Mm.
where we're coming from, folks. Here's what we think about the world, but here's how we can survive it by being together and and living our lives and appreciating what really matters.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. They've they're certainly going more in that direction, aren't they? To They sound more heartfelt at the
Yeah,
end of their career. Well, I say the end. I hope they've got a decade or two left in them at least. But you know, um,
but they don't. And I think
yeah,
one of the things that you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that one of the things that you're saying is that they're not going to become a mockery. They're not going to become a laughing stock. They're going to know
no,
when to wrap it up, and they're going to do it on their terms. They're going to do it their own way,
yeah,
and I think that's a beautiful thing, given how much they've given us.
yeah, absolutely. What I'm convinced of is, I was touching on it earlier, is they've been telling a story with their career. The whole way through. Any other band would have, after number one in heaven, they'd have made, number two in heaven, for want of a better word. They would have
Or
made,
no one in heaven, depending on how you.
yeah,
Yeah,
they'd have done This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us, part two. There was this
never did
great,
that.
yeah, exactly. There was this great point for I've forgotten his name, Rob Brydon, when he interviewed them in London, he was talking about Elvis Presley. And when Elvis Presley was asked why he dances the way he does, why he shakes his hips, he said, well, I did it once on stage and all the girls screamed, so I carried on doing it. And Rob Brydon made the point that Sparks seemed to do the opposite to that. So Sparks tend to go in the opposite direction that you expect. But I think they always see that in the big picture. They never really return to an old sound. They never take these steps backwards. It's always somewhere new. And I think it's because they look at their entire career as a story, and a story that they haven't really shared yet. So I think with them being such great storytellers in the sense of their career and individual songs, I think they're going to end the story. There's going to be a conclusion to it.
So what do you think of the idea that Ron may be revealing in less than his usual subtle terms a little bit about his process?
They do write about their process a lot. I'm I'm not sure if it's clearer to see in Mad than it is on previous albums, but I think it's there completely. Trying to think of good examples. And what I said about In Daylight, I think is partly about their
Yeah,
process, going from the evening to the daytime. Yeah.
yeah. But and I'm trying to bring out a little bit of a different element in that
Oh, okay.
he can, you know, the idea of the two songs about the road being back to back, you know,
Oh, right.
and having that whole day where he starts out strong, then he has to deal with so much crap, and then he's still trying to write some songs, and then he kind of contrasts two different experiences so directly.
Yeah.
And to
Well,
me, that could be a message about here's my life, folks. Here's what I go
yeah.
through.
It certainly rings true. Yeah, I really like that approach. I think having the two songs involving cars next to each other, I'm sure that's deliberate. And I love what you're saying here about the pace of it. The I-405 is this glorious joyride, isn't it? And a
Right.
long red light is kind of, it's like pondering. I tie it to other songs. So with a long red light, what that really reminds me of is your call is very important to us. Please hold, because
Mm.
it's got the green light, red light, and that was at the that song is please hold can be interpreted as just wait, just keep on doing what you're doing. You don't have to go anywhere new with your music. You don't have to reinvent Sparks on the next album like you've done every album before. You can just enjoy this territory that you're in now. That's
It's
how
like
I
somebody
understand.
saying to them, hold,
Yeah, yeah,
just be,
and
yeah, it's great.
and on Hello Young Lovers that followed it, all of the songs have got repetition, both in the words and in the stories. It sort of works on two levels. You know, all I do now is dick around, is a character who's doing the same thing every day, and the repetition kind of reinforces that. And there are so many examples over that album, and I think that's a comment on Sparks repeating themselves consciously until they're ready to move on to this next phase. And I think that's what they've been doing for the last 20 years. So
Yeah.
when you get to it's been a long red light, it's like, well, what if they are about to change? What if they are about to reveal this thing and that light's going to turn green? So, yeah, I think both of those songs in my head indicate that they're about to journey into a new place for Sparks, instead of staying in that little Beethoven world.
Yeah. And
So,
I think they did. I think
mm,
with FFS and beyond, I do think there was a change, although I recognize and agree with what you're saying that it's
mm,
still within a certain framework. But I think that
yeah,
they really did change. And they saw,
mm,
I think they loved having a live band with
yeah,
FFS and said, this is really fun. And this
oh
is a
yeah,
really,
yeah,
yeah. So, but thank you for letting me share my thoughts about what that might be, what I hear as a message on this album that may not be so evident.
yeah. Well, it's a really fascinating way of looking at it. I really appreciate you sharing it, and I really appreciate you inviting me on. And
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and putting up with mine. And
Oh, I really enjoyed your ideas. Really enjoyed them.
and I always enjoy yours. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Here's where I close the show, but I don't even know what to say. I mean, either love a conversation like this or you roll your eyes and say these guys are just way off on a planet somewhere. But folks, if you really like to think about this band and want to hear more about, you know, Paul's ideas, or any of the things that we talked about, or just the great thrill of hearing from so many interesting people who I've had the opportunity to talk with, please keep joining us. And I'm supposed to tell you to subscribe, but if you haven't by now, it's okay. I love what we're doing. And thank you for everybody. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. So that concludes this episode. Paul, any final words there?
No final words for me. Just definitely subscribe to Monte's channel, because you've had some great episodes. You've had some wonderful guests, and it feels like it's still the start of something, you know. So
That'll be another conversation. I
yeah.
do have some plans. But thank you everybody for tuning in. We will see you soon with a brand new episode of Sparks Entertainment and Art. Thank you.